BLAEDEL is a #1 international bestseller from Denmark, and she's created an impressive fan base across the globe in over 38 countries. A former journalist and owner of a publishing company, Sara also created an iconic protagonist in Chief Inspector Louise Rick. Sara, welcome to Thriller Talk.
What a wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much.
Well, there's so much to say about you being so international, which I love. And so, as I mentioned, you're a renowned author in Denmark. If I'm not mistaken, you were voted Denmark's favorite author at least 4 times. And you've also done very well outside of your home country. Can you share a memorable moment that you experienced as an international author?
But I think there have been a lot of very wonderful moments, mostly because I have so many friends, for example, in the US and in Canada also. And this community of crime fiction authors, it's very, very special. And I know that for a fact because I've talked to many other authors and they do not have the same friendship, the same way that we support each other, and the same way to create these communities. So for me, being on the international market means really a lot. And I know, I, I think I know why we act like that. That is because crime fiction authors love to read crime fiction too. So when you're out doing your stuff and the things, it's with not just friends, but also people that you really admire and you have read the books because you're into reading crime fiction. And also with the bloggers, with interviewers, I mean, it's very special because we love the genre. And I think that is the thing that bring us together. And that is what I really, really love. But of course, I have really wonderful, weird, funny, crazy things that have happened. For example, the Jeff with one F that you were the woman behind. Do you remember that on Thriller Fest? We have so many things that is fun also. And my first book tour in the US brought me to Los Angeles. I'm doing book tours around, and for me, it's very special to be interviewed by some of my own idols. I mean, I've been a huge Michael Connolly fans for years and years and years. Way back when I had my own publishing house in Denmark. I mean, it was in the beginning of the 90s. It is so many years ago that at that point, Scandinavian crime fiction was not a huge thing. So I launched my own publishing house many years too early. I have to say it wasn't that clever, but I was a huge fan. So when I did that book tour, my first book tour for the Forgotten Girls in the US, it was set up so Michael Connelly should do the interview with me in Los Angeles. And that was, I mean, way out of things that I could ever been dreaming about. And when we went to the bookshop, to the bookstore, they had a speaker said, now we in 10 minutes the interview will go on and we have to introduce the queen of crime from Denmark being interviewed by Michael Connolly. And then he turned to me and said, and they didn't even call me a prince. I mean, it was so hilarious. It was so fun.
That's
Like,
really cute.
no, they didn't. I mean, most of the fun thing is when you're in very good company and you feel that you're with people you know, because the interview will be different. Sitting here with you is for me very different because we have a history. I mean, I feel that I've known you, both of you, for years, and it makes me, even that I'm sitting in Denmark, makes me feel that I belong there. And when you belong, it's to a community or to friends, or being with friends, the interview is different. You talk different, you tell different stories, and you feel different. So it feels very comfortable to be here with you, and it feels very comfortable to be out promoting books when you do it with people you know,
Mhm.
or meeting with people you know.
Well, we're both huge fans of you and your work, so we were super excited that you came on. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go back. So Kim alluded to in the intro, like you had such a successful, prolific writing career. But at what point in your life did you know you wanted to be a writer, and what finally made you take the plunge to crank out your first book?
actually, I knew for a fact that I was not going to be a writer for a long time because when I was reading crime fiction, the whole idea was that someone else created the story. Because the fact is that I have dyslexia. So I've never been into having fun writing. I mean, when I went to school, it was always the thing that makes me very nervous and uncomfortable was when I was asked to read out loud. Do you remember going to school and you have this
Yes.
thing, tomorrow we are reading this part? And I mean, I practiced a lot the day before, and it wasn't because I was lazy or anything, but when it was my turn, I was feeling so bad about it because it was so difficult for me. But as a child, I start reading crime mysteries for children. For example, the famous five, or it could be. I also what is Nancy Drew? Could it be? I mean, these mysteries, and that created my love for reading. Even that I was a slow reader, I'm still a slow reader. But coming into that wonderful space where you just put yourself into the book's character. I was one of the children in the famous five. There was four children and a dog, and I could be the dog. I wouldn't mind as long as I was with them and could go into that universe. But I was working as a journalist for years, and also working as a journalist on a television show. And at that point, you know that things can be so stressful, and you can be kind of just too much. People were shouting too much. It was going up to deadlines all the time. And I start telling myself a story. I start creating a story in my head. What if a Danish journalist was killed and was found behind this hotel in the middle of Copenhagen city center? I was just telling myself a story, and I really mean that. It sounds stupid now because we know what happened after, but at that time it was just a, a space in my head where I could walk in and be, and I was curious about that story that I created. And I didn't know until maybe 6 months later that it will turn out to be the first Louise Rick novel. I didn't know that, but I was just curious to what could happen, and I could see all of it. And I met Louise Rick in my head from the very beginning. And at that point, at one point, I was writing an old school letter to the former chief of the homicide department in Copenhagen, asking him, I was telling him that my name was Sara and I'm working on a crime novel. That was a lie. I wasn't. But I was telling him I was working on this crime novel. What would happen if it was real? I mean, would they go in, and where would they park the bike? You know, in Copenhagen, everyone is riding a bike. So where would you put that? How are the lunch arranged? Who's taking care of this on that? Everyday details that was not put up to the police's specific work, but the whole situation around the the workday, if you were working at the homicide department. What I didn't count on at that time was that he was calling me, really calling me on the phone next day and say, "That is so interesting. Why don't you come in and have a meeting? Meet us." So
Wow.
I went. At that point, I was like, "What? Wow!" And then I went to visit them in the homicide department, and he was serving me a cup of coffee, a very bad cup of coffee. And I didn't feel that I could just say, "Hey, this was just for fun. The book, I don't know." I I knew for a fact at that point that this is my way in. The door had opened for me. I will take this serious. I'm very. I was very sure that I have Louise Rick, and she was a real person. You can say it's maybe stupid, but for me, she was real, and that I because I haven't ever been writing any fiction before, so for me it was difficult to create the space around her or the workplace. But now that I had my way into it, it felt very easy and very natural. So it was kind of feeling that Louise Rick she found me, and then I start working with her. So, Ryan, I didn't plan it. I mean, it was not my plan ever, because being dyslexic and have to write 300 pages, it's a huge thing. But I have to, I also have to say I'm not very dyslexic, but enough that I'm not super good at, like, there's always letters that I can put in right. But now, of course, I've been writing so much, so it's easier. But it was not for the fun of writing, it was absolutely for the story.
Mm. That's a great answer, though. And the truth is, you couldn't have planned it better. You know, even if you did, like, I mean, that's a great moment, and it's such a great story. Thank you for sharing it.
I love it. We can call you the reluctant author, you know? Didn't want to go, but you had to. Something was, well, your fans are super, like, including us, are super happy that that happened. And I love it because the way I see it is that your internal voice knew you needed to do this and
Mm.
you had to just find a way in. And there you did. So during your really like incredible career, you know, you've made bestseller lists, you've, you know, won awards, you had a lot of different accolades. What are you most proud of?
I think that I'm most proud of creating something that people like to spend time being with. If you know what I mean. It's not like,
Mhm.
because I am very proud of being published in almost 40 countries. I'm very proud of every award I've received. I'm very proud of every time people spend time reviewing my books or selling my books, booksellers. I mean, but but it means a lot to me, and I really mean that, because it means a lot to me every time people spend time reading what I've been writing. It's such a uh, because it wasn't in the card that I should be a writer at some point. It never felt like it wasn't even a dream. It was not something that I've really wanted. It happened, as you said, because yeah, I've stumbled into the story, and every time the story, still I'm writing a new Louis Rick now, and it is number 12 in the series, and still I have the feeling that the story is coming to me, and I am so curious. It's such a pleasure for me to dig into it, to see what comes out of it. It's still, it is still a drive for me to do it. It's not just because my publisher expect a new novel every year. It's not like that. So I mean, it is, I'm very happy every single time a person pick up one of my books and spend time reading it or listen to it or whatever they do. So it's not just being out there on stage that makes me happy. It's very much comments on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever. People reach out to me and say, "Hey, I really enjoy it." And both of you will know that if you can help someone in difficult situation, they maybe they've lost a beloved relative, or they deal with some issues in life, and they say, I totally it really helps me. You book, not because you're writing about that, but I had a space to walk into. If people can use my book for that, it's wonderful. But every time they pick up a book and enjoy it, it makes me really happy.
And that sort of honestly flows into my next question really well, because now that we know that you're sort of like the reluctant author, did you ever think back when you were writing that first book and committed to it? Did you ever think that you'd still be writing novels today, all this time later? And do you ever like worry that you might run out of ideas?
I've never had the feeling that I was starting up a series that now is on 12 books, almost 12 books. I mean, I've been, no, Ryan, never, ever. And and that is also because I've as we mentioned earlier, way back I had my own publishing house. And both of you will know that that is not, it's very rare that a book is an overnight success. It happens
Mhm.
once in a while. It happens, of course it can happen. But I knew that I should be so happy if my first book was sold in 100 or 200 copies. I mean, I knew the way around it. Someone that's not familiar with our with the book business, they will think, "Oh, I can sell thousands and thousands because I'm brilliant and people will love it right away." Good for you. But for me, I was more like, it will never happen. It will be a success if I can finish this book, if I can make it work, and if it will come out there and be out there on the shelf, maybe in the back of the bookstore, I don't know. But I did never take it as a natural thing that I would succeed. And I also have to say I absolutely did not succeed with the first book. Not at all. Not at all. It was like in in a way, of course, it was out there, but it wasn't a success at all. My second book was the one that started rolling. But after I no, when I was writing the first one, I did not see it as a series. I was into the story as a, whoa, this is I'm curious what could happen. Will these characters work? I could see Louise Rick very clearly, and also her best friend Camilla Lind very clearly. But what actually happened was that when I'm doing my research, for example, I'm of course at the homicide department, and I'm also at the Forensic Institute. And after I've been writing the book, before I send it to my publisher, I'm running all the details, the facts through with these professionals. And I went to see my forensic scientist who helped me, and just to make sure, you know, all the facts was clear, because it was totally new to me to write all these horrible details, and I'm trying not to do it, not to make them too horrible. But for me, it's like, a secret about me is that I cannot see blood. I mean, it's hilarious when you're a crime fiction author, but when you tap, you know, you go to and have the donor blood, or I'm not a donor because it will kill me, but I'm, even when my son was, when he scratched his knees or something, I was like, whoa, I cannot see, look at it. So the forensic scientist details was hard for me to do. So I went there and visited him, and he was delayed because he was assisting. There was a woman who had been raped, and there will be a doctor, a nurse, and there will be a forensic scientist to pick up the DNA stuff and all that. That is procedure, and he was doing that. So I had to wait a little bit for him, and when he was coming back, he said, "Oh, that was one of these horrible things." Where, I mean, remember, this was in 2005, so
Mhm.
it's a long time ago. And he said it's horrible with these online dating cases where they meet on the internet. They decided to go out. They decided to go home together. They actually also decided to have sex, but they didn't talk about when to stop. And sometimes that would bring the woman in a very, very bad situation. And that was what happened here. And he said, we have the DNA, but the profile has been deleted, so we have no one on the other end. And of course, you will always also start thinking, oh, how can I use this? So I did not search for the idea to the second book, because that it came before I finished,
Wow.
totally finished
Mhm.
book number one. But what happened, and then what happened, now I'm getting back to your question, sorry. But what happened was that I was then I was really rolling, because my second book was my breakthrough here in Denmark. I was quitting my job and think, because I would start having also speeches, and here, at book number 3, when I start working in my head on that one, I did not have a clue of what I should write about. I was totally empty. I was like, oh, stupid you, now you you quit your job, you think you're a big author now? Okay, great, you haven't any ideas for the next book. So that almost killed me. I mean, it was such a stupid thing, such a stupid thing to want it so much to go with the author life, that I just quit everything. But to my own excuse, it's because, I mean, I'm not, and this is not just that it's a fact. I'm not very good at a lot of things. I'm not a person. Someone is very good at tons of things and brilliant doing this and that. I'm not. I'm trying to be very good at a very few things. So I knew for a fact if if people really start reading my books, I want to put all my energy into it, and then I cannot be a super producer at a television show at the same time. I cannot do that. I have to put my energy into one of these things and trying to have all my focus in that direction. And the bad thing was that I didn't have an idea for the next book. So I had to work a lot, work. I had to invite some of the head police officers. I invite them to lunch and talk and talk and talk. And my first ideas for my third book was, I cannot even come up with it, but they say, "Oh, Sarah, it sounds so boring, so boring. I think you should go in another direction." And then they start telling me. One of them start telling me about a case, a huge case in Denmark many years ago about honor killing. A Muslim woman was killed by her own family. And I was like, yeah, it was a horrible story. And I was like, okay, in a crime novel, it's very obvious, it's very easy to see who is behind it. So maybe it's not a good idea. But then they talked about a lot of things that happened around this family and makes me so curious. And it was, I love the story. It meant a lot to me. So that was my third one. But yes, I've tried not to. Jesus Christ, it's long answers.
That's a good one though. I mean, it's so funny because sometimes you talk to writers and they've got their next 10 books planned out. I once talked to Daniel Silva and he said that he's got so many ideas he could never get them all down. But then you talk to the other one and they're like, I have no idea what I'm writing next year, but I know I'll figure it out. So I love to ask that to sort of see what side you come down on, and I love the answer.
I would be I mean, I would be afraid if I have planned too many things in too many books in the series, I would be afraid that I couldn't live up to it. So I don't know what my next book will be about. But at some point, I hope. It's also never feeling natural to sit down and really think hard about it, because what if it's not the right story? I always have to wait for the right story.
I really respect it. It sounds to me like you're similar, and I think both Ryan and I are this way as well. Very organic writers that, it's like we have to just feel the story and kind of muddle our way through it. And which I love doing, because I always think if the reader is surprised, hopefully if I'm surprised, right, as an author in discovery. It's about discovery, really. You're unboxing things. So speaking of ideas, A Harmless Lie, phenomenal title, by the way. I absolutely love it. Where did you get that idea from? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So one of my earlier books, there is a young woman who is acting very interesting, because she's getting very nervous and psychological weak when people disappear. And I used that in a specific way in that earlier book. And I was so curious about her. And we talk about a book that was published 8 years ago or 9 years ago. And I was so curious about her. So I created her background story just for me. I mean, just because I wanted to know exactly why this happened to her and how she became like that. And I was living in New York, for a couple of years, and I was writing on a trilogy outside the Louise Rick series, a trilogy that is very much, it's not crime fiction like my Louise Rick novels. It's much more the suspense in relations, in family relations, in choices we make. What impact will that have on other people? And when I was almost finishing that trilogy, I've put Louise Rick on hold for 3 or 4 years, and I didn't know for sure that I would pick her up again. I didn't know. It very much depended on the story. If I could come up with a story that felt natural to come into that series again. But at that point, one day I had, wow, now I know exactly how I want to bring her back, because I want to bring Louise back in a story where she's not working as a police detective, where she's not investigating, she's not in charge of anything. She is a relative to the story, to the crime plot. And that's a very new situation. I mean, for 9 books she's been in charge for, and she's I think that she's very, very professional normally. So it makes me so curious to bring her back on the private, in a private way, where she's just a very normal person. um and then I was thinking about it, how can I bring her back? And I can do that if her brother's wife disappears. I love these cases with when people disappear. I'm so curious about what happened. And then the old story about Mona came up. In Denmark, it's very, very common. In every school, we are on a field trip when we are around 13 years old. Are you doing the same? Are you doing in school a field trip with your school class
Oh, yes.
for a
Yeah.
week or so,
Yeah.
or 4 days or 5 days? Is
Oh
that
yeah.
also
Yes,
common? Yeah, because
definitely.
it's very common. Everyone is doing it here in different places, but a lot of schools in Denmark are going to the small island called Bornholm. It's very close to Sweden. Um, and when you go there, it's for many of us the first time that we will be away for a week or so, as 5 days, with other teenagers and away from our parents, and it's very exciting. So that is a thing we have in common here, in common. And I wanted to write, I want to put that into the story, because on one of these field trip to Bornholm, a young woman is disappearing. And that was my old story back then, 8 or 9 years ago, when I created Mona and try to find out what happened since she behaved like that. And I was so into, we start the harmless lie where the body is found so many years later, and it's there under a tree, and no one knows what happened to the young girl who disappeared from that school trip years ago. And I put the story on Bornholm, and also in that area where I grew up, where I have my teenage life. So I'm using a lot of my own teenage memories and teenage experience in this book. And I think one of the things that means a lot to me when you're talking about teenagers is the mix of being almost adult and being very much a child still.
Hmm.
So consequences when you are 13, it's very different from the consequences that we can relate to, because here it's very much about, oh, you cannot tell my parents that I ran off this evening. Before I start writing this book, I was out I had a big speech somewhere, and people always ask me, will there come more Louise Rick? And I was saying, yes, actually, I think there will. And then I asked, how many have been on school field trips? And a lot of people was like, I have. In fact, actually, all of them. And then in the audience, I did not know that there was one woman from my old school class, and she came up to me after that and said, oh yes, on Bornholm, I really remember that. Do you remember when we ran off out of the window in the evening? Do you remember that we met these young guys from Bornholm on motorbikes? And I was like, no, I did not. Do not remember. You didn't invite me. You were doing all that without me. But it was the inspiration to, of course they ran off and met with the local boys. Of course they had all that adventure, because that is what, maybe not everyone, but some of the Danish children is doing when they are on school trips. They're doing something that the teachers do not know of. So I start creating a harmless lie on all these teenage memories and the thing we did. We didn't do all of it, I have to say.
Well, you have to make it a little more exciting, right? In the fiction. That's what's fun. I love it. That's a really profound story. I love it.
We do similar things here, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, good.
We're
Oh,
doing
good. Oh,
plenty that
good.
the
Oh, good.
teachers don't know about, and I have 6 kids. I can tell you for sure that is still the case. So,
In
but
some way, I'm happy to hear that.
yeah, I mean, it was a lot more fun when I was the one doing what you're not supposed to do. It's a whole lot less fun being the parent getting the call that your kids are doing the things they're not supposed to be doing. But here's one I was dying to ask you. And I'm not asking you to give away your secrets or anything like that, but you have fabulous villains, like every time. And to me, it's always one of my favorite things about your writing and your style. You have these twisted, just dark characters. So I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, like, what, in your opinion, makes for a good antagonist?
I think that it's, for me, it's important that it's not just black and white. I mean, I like to put, maybe it's a stupid answer, but I like when I create it and I start imagine how this would work or how could this have happened in real life. That is always a way to go into it for me, probably also for you to, if this happened in real life, how would it have happened? And for me, it's very much being, it's very, it's much more creepy if you didn't see that someone will harm you. I mean, if everything is normal, if everything looks like everyday things, and if you do not say, oh, there is a bad guy, I'm afraid, I have all my things up, I'm alert. If you're not alert at all, it's because it's a normal person. It's because it's a it could be you, me, Kim. It could be all of us, but it's not, of course. But if you cannot see it coming, and if there is also good things in a bad person, I mean, yeah, maybe it sounds like a cliche, but for me, it's very important. I mean, it's not that fascinating to create a bad person if he's just bad or she is just bad. It's much more fascinating if it could be your aunt or your uncle, or if it could be anyone you know, to put this into what if happened. And also, the first time I was aware that it's not that simple to create billions was when I was overdoing it. I was putting way too much into the character. I mean, it was like everything had went wrong for him in his childhood, or it didn't work. I could feel that it didn't work. So I was calling. I do not remember the word, but you know, the one who's doing a mental. If people are getting caught and brought to prison, you have to figure out, are they can they be in normal prison, or are they something
Right.
happened?
Mentally
A
ill, yeah.
psychological test in a way. Kim, do you know what it's?
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
I do not remember the word.
whether they're competent to stand trial.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was like, what is wrong with him? How can I create a person that we trust, that is still a normal person, but something went wrong, and he just said, Sarah, you overdoing it. It's much more reliable that he's not all the things that you've put into him. You do not need all these things. And that was a very, does it make sense? Do I explain it?
Yeah.
Okay. You overdoing it, and it makes, that's the fine line of making a character or a character as someone who's just out of character. And I was putting too much into it. So at that point, I learned that it's much more interesting to put the bad person as close as the good ones. As I mean, so it's just small twists that happen. But at the same time, I always want to know, why is this billions behaving like this?
Mhm.
What is the background? Why is it turning out that you can become a killer? Because in effect, all of us, I think, but that's my theory, can become a killer if we are in a situation. Now, for my example, it would be if someone is hurting my child. Now he's 24 and almost 2 meters high, so he's not that easy to knock down anymore. But I mean, I think that you can be brought in a situation, all of us almost, maybe not because I've not been in that situation, and thank God for that, but you can be brought in a situation where things are coming up that you act on. And then, of
Mhm.
course, there is this pure evil, the pure evil that is easy to see and easy to find. I think it's much more scaring when you cannot see it.
Mhm.
I love that answer. Profound. I always think that, villains have to be the hero of their own story. And they also, like you said, have to have really intrinsic motivation to do what they're doing. So you nailed it
Exactly.
totally. Yeah, I love what you said. So before we wrap up today, Sarah, we would really like to know what you're working on next. Because we know everyone go get your copy of A Harmless Lie. And but what's next for you, Sarah?
It's the next Louise Rick novel, because what happened, what actually really happened, was that I brought her back, being in the situation where she is into the story but not as an investigator. And at that point in that book, in A Harmless Lie, she had to find out if she wants to come back and work again, if she wants to be. I've given her a very good job. She was supposed to be the chef of the homicide department in Copenhagen. And when I was writing A Harmless Lie, I was thinking, oh, Jesus Christ, that sounds so boring. I don't think that I can bring her back in that position. I think I will be so bored. So I created a new unit, and actually, and the fun thing is that it's coming up for real now in real life in Denmark. I created a new unit that can, a kind of a mobile task force that can be working all over Denmark with special skills. And it's not like Superwoman at all, but very, very good investigators. For example, Louise Rick, she's a very good one when it comes to homicides. There can be one that is very good when it comes to missing persons, and all the special skills that are what they call here in Denmark the special forces, that can be added on the local police um, departments around Denmark. We have 12 um, police areas or units, or what you can say, one in Copenhagen, one in Jylland, one in, I mean, around Denmark. And this, they are called in everyday talk, we call them police unit 1 or 2 or 3 and 4, and we have these 12. And then I created P13, so it's the special one that you can drop all over when they need assistance for special skills. So I put her in front of that one and lead of that one, and I was so into the story and I liked it so much. So I was like, whoa, this is a new beginning, and it works really well for me, because now she can go not only in Copenhagen or investigating around Copenhagen. Now she can go all over Denmark, and she can assist in every kind of cases. And I really enjoy it, and it suits her very, very well to be in that position. So I'm working on a new one. I'm writing it, and it will come out later in Denmark later this year.
Well, it sounds phenomenal because I
Mhm.
love the flexibility and location, right? The geographic, and also a new role, because I think with any series that goes on for a length of time, you have to inject new life into it, and that's exactly what you've done.
I totally agree. It also, for me and for the readers, and make new, create new spaces, and also go into these small areas that we could never. I mean, it wouldn't be trustworthy if I put the Copenhagen Police Department into investigate something as far away from Copenhagen. So I really, really enjoy it.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. I'm really pleased that you could actually meet Ryan in person after all these wonderful years of him reviewing your books and loving your books too.
Yeah, I was super excited to finally meet you and get to talk to you. And thank you so much for coming on. I know we really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for taking time doing this interview with me. It means a lot to me, and it is so wonderful to see you. It's almost like being there again.
We'll have to
Thank you
talk.
so much for reading the books also.
Oh, of course, we were huge fans. Anyways, thanks everybody, and make sure you get your copy of A Harmless Lie.